I want to introduce our guest speaker today, Mr. Tom Frederick. Tom is a lead quality improvement specialist in the quality department at Michigan Medicine. He's been at Michigan Medicine since 2017, serving important roles in the adult hospitals in establishing the daily management system, such as daily huddles, collaborative problem solving, and leader routines. His goal is to improve outcomes for both patients and staff. He's also integral to the designing and facilitation of improvement trainings within the health system for staff, including programs like Practicing Healthcare Improvement Class, Just Culture Class, and Patient Safety and Quality Improvement Scholars Program, of which both Keith and I are graduates and got our fundamental training in quality. So we want to recognize him. And Tom, I'm going to let you take it away there for this fun presentation.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you all. I laud you for your efforts all around the state of Michigan, improving the quality of our care, improving patient outcomes. I'm really honored to be with you. We're going to talk briefly today and do some hands-on practice regarding problem solving and identifying root causes. We all know that if you pull the dandelion out and you hear the little snap, it's coming back, because we didn't get the root to the root of the problem. And we want to avoid that in our problem solving. So during the session, my objective is that you'll review the framework and the benefits of a problem solving method called A3 problem solving. Really just going to focus on one aspect of that today. We're going to actively participate in a root cause analysis process, experience the power of identifying countermeasures to address specific root causes, and then practice collaboratively prioritizing countermeasures once we come up with them. To give me some feedback of what your knowledge is in this area, if you have done an A3 or if you have done a root cause analysis, either a fishbone diagram or a root cause tree, can you just type into the chat the word yes. And as that water falls by, I'll be able to see where people are at. Awesome. I see a lot of yeses. So what does problem solving usually look like? The problems that we face in our daily work are often poorly defined, intertwined. When this happens, they can become sort of background noise, things that we deal with, frustrations in our day. But with a bit of effort and a simple methodology, we can untangle that problem solving, focus our resources, and solve our problems. If you're familiar with this 1970s arcade game, is called Whack-A-Mole. Sometimes our problem solving looks like this. Problems pop up and we whack them down, and another one pops up and we whack them down. Sometimes our problem solving can look like this, where a fire starts in one area, not literally, of course. A problem arises and we all pool our efforts and race over there and extinguish the problem, pat ourselves on the back, and move to the next one. And at the end of the day, this can be very, very frustrating and very, very tiresome. I once worked with a very skilled ICU team trying to introduce structured scientific problem solving. They said, we're all problem solvers here. We don't need this. We know how to put out fires like nobody else. And I asked them to give me some examples, and I'm like, wow, that is amazing. You guys have a lot of fires down here and you really put them out well. You guys know how to deal with your problems. What if we looked at the reasons that those problems were coming up, and we addressed the root causes for those and made it so those problems didn't arise, those fires didn't start? And they just scratched their head and said, hey, that might be very beneficial. So it comes down to doing four basic, simple things. Doing our work in a standard way that we created, the team doing the work, the real subject matter experts, being alert to things going on, and having some way to escalate issues, and then have closed loop communication and feedback based on what was escalated. Fix the problem now. Obviously, we want containment. If your house is on fire, put the fire out. Don't form a structured scientific problem solving group to try to address it. But then we want to find and address the root causes of those problems. And really, this is what we're going to focus on today. So what does structured problem solving look like? I saw a lot of yeses in the chat. So many of you are familiar with the A3 process, but we're engaging all stakeholders in building consensus. We're clearly defining and scoping our problems. We're making data-driven decisions. We're mapping the situation getting a system view, we're collecting data, we're observing, we're listening to all perspectives, and then we're we're identifying root causes and identifying countermeasures and doing experiments to address those root causes. Then, of course, once we have our improvement, we want to put in place systems to sustain that improvement. So what drives our problem solving? A lot of things, sometimes internal goals, external goals, sometimes they are regulatory goals, maybe payer related metrics and measures. And you all in Medic have a lot of different things that you're working on. Today, we're going to focus just on head injury, adult minor head injury, and pediatric intermediate risk minor head injury. And I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't look at all of your data. You've had a lot of success in this area, and that's great for two reasons. Often we'll try to focus on the areas where we have the greatest opportunity for growth, and that's probably the standard pathway for solving problems together. But we also want to be mindful that there's always room for improvement. So even if we've improved a measure by 10% from 85% compliance to 95, there's still 5% room for growth, and we will always want to be striving towards better. So we'll see these later if we're working on the adult head CT use. This will be the problem that we'll be focusing on in our breakout groups. And if we're working on the pediatric, this will be the problem focus in our breakout groups. And we'll see these slides again, have a chance to reflect on them. So again, we are just going to look at the root cause analysis and the recommendations portions of the A3 methodology. And it all really begins with a simple question, why? And I like to show this Hyundai commercial from several years ago, just to focus us on the question we want to ask.
Why?
Because the porch needs some work.
Why?
Because plants need water to grow.
Why?
Because baseball's played in the summer. Oxygen and hydrogen. Gravity. Because that's just the shape of my head. Because monkeys don't get married. It's complicated. Because I forgot to get a receipt. I don't know.
Why?
Why not?
Why?
Why don't you go ask your dad?
Why?
When you drive a Sonata, people might think you know something they don't. The
So
Sonata.
not here to advocate for Sonata, but just the process of asking why over and over in a causal chain to get to a actionable root cause. And as small children, we had this ability. We asked why all the time. As we become older and as we are adults, we tend not to ask why so much. And there's probably a lot of reasons, but I'm giving you the freedom today, the permission to ask why. And I'm going to walk you through an example. I worked with a clinic team, an ambulatory care team, and in their clinic, their drivers were HEDIS measures. And their HEDIS measures are much like our the measures and metrics that are driving Medic or HCAHPS in the in the inpatient hospital areas. And one of their measures that they decided to focus on was depression screening rates for eligible patients. And they looked at their data and they realized that it was only being done 48% of the time. So they asked why. And one of the answers was, well, eligible patients don't get the form at check-in. Okay, why is that? Because the check-in staff determined the patient didn't need the form. Oh, okay, well, why is that? Because the check-in panel for the electronic medical record indicated the patient already got a form. So why would I give them another one? They already have one. Well, why did it indicate that? Because the patient did receive the form at a prior visit, but hadn't turned it back in. And the check-in staff had no way of knowing that. So their information was incomplete. The data that they were reacting to was incomplete. And because of that, an eligible patient was missed at check-in and didn't get the depression screening form. So very simple to do we call this a 5 why analysis, but you don't have to ask why 5 times. It could be 2 times or 4 times or 7 times or 9 times. We're asking why until we get to an actionable root cause. We want to be careful to focus on the why and not the who. A 5 who analysis often jumps to blaming and pointing fingers and leads to disengagement. And we don't want to jump to solutions early. We could have focused on this step right here and said, okay, the eligible patient didn't get the form at check-in. Well, here's what we're going to do from now on. We're going to give every patient that comes through those doors a form. Now, that would certainly address the problem, but it would also lead to waste because there's a lot of patients who aren't eligible and don't need the form. And we would be wasting forms. We would be wasting their time filling out a form with data that we don't need. So we want to be patient and wait until we get to the bottom of the root cause analysis. Now, of course, when we ask why, we don't always get just one answer. It's not always linear in the problems that we face. So you might get 3 answers, and you would just ask why individually on each of those. Maybe 1 or 2 lead to other growing branches. And finally, when we have this, what we call a root cause tree, because it looks like the roots of a tree growing down, we would identify the bottom of each branch as a possible root cause. And the team that we worked with in the clinic working on depression screening did that. And they realized patients don't receive the form at the front desk. That was one reason. But sometimes they received it, they didn't return the form filled out. That was another reason. Sometimes they did return the filled out form, but it didn't get entered into the medical record. And they went through this analysis asking why until they got to some identifiable root causes. This group also had some data they had gathered, and they added that to their root cause tree. They realized that the left-hand branch happens 25% of the time. The middle branch is only happening 13% of the time. The right-hand branch happens 27% of the time. And this can guide you. Our resources are limited. We can't solve all of our problems. If one thing is happening more frequently than another, we might focus on our first countermeasure addressing that. So that's a very brief overview of a root cause analysis. And now we're going to do this in our breakout rooms. We're going to be sent to breakout groups, either working on the adult CT or the pediatric CT problem improvement. We're going to have facilitators in each group, and they'll be sharing some Google Slides or some PowerPoint slides. And just for, we were going to have everyone have access to it, but to prevent technical glitches and things, we're just going to have the facilitator share these slides, and then you will give information in the chat or verbally, and they will scribe for you. You're going to review your problem statement. You're going to do a 5 why analysis or a root cause tree, just asking why over and over. Don't try to solve the problem. Don't jump to solutions. We're a little too early for that. And we'll have about 15 minutes. What questions do you have before Andy sends us off to our groups? Just a couple quick questions by way of debrief. What were the takeaways from using this method, asking why, doing a root cause analysis, versus just jumping to a possible solution? How many of you felt the desire to jump to a possible solution and started stating solutions instead of possible reasons?
I think our group did pretty good with sticking with the why questions and keep asking whys.
Yes, thank you. I see in the chat, not everyone who worked, and I was thinking about this as I listened to the previous speakers. Not everyone who works in the ED is emergency medicine trained, so not everyone's aware of this literature. And when we teach this process in our classes, you might bring a problem. Maybe you want to reduce pressure injuries on your unit. And there's a nurse and a MA in the group who's aware of that. And then there's somebody who works in shared services. We call those fresh eyes. They are able to ask just pure open-ended, humble questions to better understand because they're not familiar. They're not subject matter experts. And it's good to have a balance of both on your problem-solving teams. What were some of the root causes that came to the forefront in the groups?
I think one of the big things for us, it kept going back to education or knowing the tool.
100%. And often we find that for us, we're an academic medical center, and education is one of the first things that we identify as a possible need, and education can be very successful. Also, doing things in a standard way. I learned that one of the causes is the patient gets the CT automatically during triage by the nurse. And why is that happening? Because the nurse orders the test prior to physician evaluation, at least in some instances. And why is that? Because the algorithm that the nurse is following doesn't include the CCHR. So right there, we say, well, hey, what are some possible countermeasures that we can apply? And we'll be doing that in our next breakout. What things can we do to address this root cause? So just to show you an example, the team that was working on depression screening, they came up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 possible root causes, and they started to now brainstorm, but not just throwing solutions, spaghetti at the wall, so to speak, but educated brainstorming based on knowledge of what's really happening. And they said, well, we can address this. Front desk checks the EMR, and it showed that the form was already handed out, but they didn't know it never got turned in. The MA could highlight eligible patients during chart prep the day before. So the front desk now knows, and they have that critical information that they need. And they started coming up with ideas. That's these blue sticky notes, and they put them right on the root cause tree. This really helps us to be mindful that we are addressing root causes, not just making stuff up. Now, often we have knowledge and experience, and our making stuff up is addressing root causes, so I don't want to belittle that. But when we come up with an idea, we want to make sure it's addressing one of the root causes. If it's not, that could be because we missed a root cause, and your great idea can help us to go back through our root cause tree and make it more robust. What do we do once we get all these great ideas, these countermeasures to address root causes? And there's a tool called an impact effort grid. Can you type yes in the chat if you've used an impact effort grid before? Basically, there's a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. On the vertical, we're asking ourselves, how much impact, how much bang for our buck are we going to get if this works out like we think it will? And on the horizontal, how much effort is it going to take? How many resources are we going to have to put into it to make this happen, to do this experiment? And we place each one on the grid, and things will go into certain quadrants. Perhaps we have one here, man, that's a great idea, but it's going to be very impactful, but take a lot of effort. And we have one here that's not so impactful, but it's really easy. We can just do it tomorrow with very few resources. And this helps us as a group, one, to dialogue how much impact and effort will there be for each countermeasure, because I might think, oh, that'd be very easy. But Nicole says, are you kidding me? Do you know what I have to do to accomplish what you're suggesting? And that helps me to understand a more system-wide view. So the clinic team did this. They put their ideas on their impact effort grid. They had dialogue to move them up and down and left and right until the group all agreed. And then they chose one possible one. And we even use visual management in the tool. You'll see that the stuff in the lower right, that's red. That's going to take a lot of effort and might not have a lot of impact. May be careful about those. The ones in the upper left, those are green. Go for it. That's going to take very little effort, and it could be very impactful. These are the things we might want to try first. So in our second activity, we're going to review the root cause analysis. Looking at that tree, we're going to start proposing countermeasures to address the root causes. And then we'll have some discussion as to how much impact we might get, how much effort it will take. And if we have time, the breakouts do go quickly. I'm going to ask each team to identify one countermeasure that they, if this were their team and their project, would prioritize as the first thing they would like to try. So what questions do you have? Again, that went very quickly, but let's debrief. What were the key takeaways from using this method, this impact effort grid, prioritizing countermeasures that were addressing specific root causes versus maybe other ways of problem solving that you've done in the past?
I think it's a good tool because you could automatically jump to something that is, oh, you think it's going to be a really great idea, but it's, high cost and high effort, and realizing that really we should pick some of this low-hanging fruit first, you know.
100%. Thank you, Patty. Well said. And often we do that. Without spending the extra time, we like to say, go slow to go fast. Go slow to understand so you can go fast to solution when you're actually addressing root causes and doing things that will take the least amount of effort and give you the most impact. Often we spin our wheels a lot and we spend a lot of effort, and maybe what we're doing isn't really even addressing a root cause.
I think it also forced us to get a little more specific, like what kind of education? Is it how the education's packaged? Is it when they get it, depending on who it is? So really having to drill down a bit on that part of it.
100%. Yes. Well said, Megan. Actually, that was specifically, we came up with a countermeasure. Well, I'll share very briefly our group's root cause tree. Can you see the root cause tree? Awesome. So we said that there's three main reasons. Patients are getting the CT automatically during triage from the nurse. Why? The nurse orders a test prior to physician evaluation. Why? The nurse algorithm doesn't include CCHR. So a very simple countermeasure is, hey, let's update that algorithm. And we kind of, when we did our impact effort grid, that's where we landed, because we thought, that was going to be very low effort and maybe a lot of impact. But then somebody very astutely said, well, wait up. I would want some data to know how many of these CTs are ordered during triage by the nurse versus by the provider. Because if it's 1 in 100, maybe that's not going to be a lot of bang for our buck. But if it's 40% or 30%, hey, that could be a very good thing for us to do. So very robust problem solving. Now, I did say to my team, in all transparency, this wasn't a root cause analysis. It was kind of a root cause assumption, because we didn't have our team. We didn't have all of our data. We didn't have a high level system understanding, because this might be something we're very ancillarily attached to. But my hope is you'll take this thinking back to your teams and be able to build on this, or recreate a different root cause tree for a different measure or problem or frustration that you are working on, and follow through with addressing those root causes with countermeasures, and then prioritizing them to choose one thing to try first. Why would we try only one thing first? Why, if I have 3 great ideas, why don't I do them all?
You need to be able to assess what change you've made is making what outcome. And
Perfect.
It can be overwhelming for all of those involved to have 2 trains of thought.
100%. And let's say we try 3 things and we see a 12% improvement. How do we know that each of those contributed to the improvement? Maybe 2 of them led to a 20% improvement, and the third one led to an 8% reduction, net gain of 12, but we would never know that if we tried many of them together. Does anyone else want to share their root cause tree or their impact effort grid, where they ended up? No brave souls out there? Does anyone want to say what countermeasure they ended up selecting, if they did get to one? Or type it into the chat. I see pay doctors to order less CTs. Samantha, measure twice, cut once. Yeah, go slow to go fast.
I will say in our group, the one thing that came out of it that was relatively low effort but could be high impact is just providing kudos to the providers that are doing things well, or the sites that are doing things well. Just, get it out there, not just focusing on the things that need to be improved, but the things that are going well could be somewhere to start.
Yeah, great idea. And when we're talking about building a culture, of continuous improvement and high reliability. We actually experienced this. We were trying to improve pain assessment and reassessment in the inpatient units. And the first attempt was, hey, let's put the names on the huddle boards of everyone who's doing poorly, kind of publicly shaming them. And that didn't really go anywhere. That really disengaged people. A couple leaders said, wait up, that's all wrong. Let's put the names on the huddle board of those who are really successful at it. And let's give them kudos and hold them up as a standard. And then others can say, hey, Dawn, what are you doing? You got a 99% pain reassessment score. That's amazing. I'm down in the 70s. Help me out. What's your secret? A great idea, Katie. I see Dawn. Go ahead.
Yeah, Tom's Michelle in my favor. You know, there was a lot of discussion about trying to get the right information into clinicians' hands at the time they're making the decision, you know, and how to go about doing that through education, and trying to and also like influences like from external sources and referring physicians trying to already set up the patient to get the tests that they have to, you know, the ED providers then have to kind of conflict with. So, you know, education is, you know, a little bit laborious, but they felt that that was where the money is. The one thing that came out that I want to just, it's like in lower resource places, tech isn't always available. So those low, you know, paper, you know, something at the elbow that can be visualized at the time, sometimes in the EDs, they just don't have the information right at the elbow, and having that old fashioned stuff is still reliable.
Yeah, great point, Michelle. That was actually down the center path of our root cause analysis. One of the things we realized was the patient came with expectations of getting a CT, a full workup, and sometimes the provider doesn't want to go against that expectation, because now we might be hit with low patient satisfaction scores, or it might take longer to do a full assessment and you know, and to educate the patient. Whereas, you know, if we just maybe made a simple pamphlet that we could have on hand in the ED, and just to explain, you know, the risk-benefit analysis in a simple way might help that. So that was a great example, and our group came to a similar conclusion. Well, here's what the clinic team that was working on the depression screening rates and improving that, here's what they came up with. They identified that their front desk wasn't always aware of who needs the form. So they said, you know, well, let's make a standard practice. And they drew up this little standard work. Our countermeasure is going to be the night before or the afternoon before, when the MA is doing schedule prep, they're going to highlight in green any patient who's eligible. And now the next day, I pull up the calendar, I'm checking people in, I see a green highlight, I give them a form, and they were able to see some very rapid improvement. Inch by inch, life's a cinch. Yard by yard, life is hard. Don't be afraid to do small things. Somebody, Dawn, put roll out small amounts of education over time. Yeah, little baby steps, baby steps. If we try to take on too much and we don't have success, it tends to be disengaging. Some ideas that we find are always very helpful: agreeing to do things in the standard way. If everyone's doing things differently and leading to different variation and different outcomes, we might want to look at our process and see which parts of it might benefit from standardization. Making things visual. Our brains process visuals thousands of times faster than words. And review evidence-based practices. Matic is great for that. I was amazed to see the publications that you guys are doing, and the improvement that you're experiencing. Evidence-based practice is also sharing best practices with each other in collaboratives like this. Hey, what are you guys doing? Corwell, you've got 0%. This is amazing. What are you doing? Help us out. We know that your patient census is different and your resources and, you know, whatnot are different, but we can learn from what you're doing. And even having on the left here, we have a picture of a idea generation board. We have these on the daily huddle boards. So when somebody has a great idea, maybe we expressed an issue or a bottleneck for the day or something frustrating or a patient risk, possible patient harm event, we can brainstorm ideas right there. And usually we find that the greatest resource for an organization is the human resource. It's the people doing the work every day who are the real subject matter experts, and we can use their ideas as countermeasures as we're identifying root causes. It's important to keep track of our learning and our experimentation, we use a tool called the PDCA record. It's very simple. On the left-hand side, we write what's the plan and how are we going to measure if we're improving. On the right-hand side, what happened and what did we learn? So for this team, their plan was the MAs were going to highlight eligible patients during chart prep, and the front desk would then give out the forms as needed. And before, their metric was 25% of patients were being missed at the front desk, and after their experiment, only 14. So 9% improvement. So very simple. What we learned when MAs highlight the eligible patients during chart prep, fewer eligible patients are missed. This is great work. And here's an example of what their A3 looked like, just for your reference as you're reviewing the slides later. It has everything from scoping the problem to getting engagement on why it's important to solve this problem now, what negative outcomes will come if we don't, understanding the current situation by collecting data, maybe mapping the process, and then doing that root cause analysis, recommendations, and PDCA experimentation. Very important that when we're doing our countermeasure experiments, we want to identify a metric, a measure. How will we know if we're improving or not? So when collaborative scientific problem solving is used, as we did together today, more of our stakeholders are engaged. Problems solved and defined more clearly and more well scoped. We're making database decisions and not just throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping it sticks. And we're getting the whole root out with that dandelion, addressing root causes. We have a lot of resources to share with you, and I am aware that many of you are not don't have access to internal Michigan medicine resources. If you do, our quality department tools website has templates for everything that we shared: impact effort grids, fishbone diagrams, root cause trees. You don't have to make any of this stuff up. Now, it's fine just to write it on a whiteboard. You don't need a template that looks all fancy to do root cause analysis. But all of these things on the right-hand side, we have available to you. Go to the link shown on the screen. It's also clickable if you download the slideshow later on. For our non-Michigan medicine partners, we have great news for you. You can scan this QR code or go to this link up here. And we have all of our resources available in a Dropbox, accessible to anyone in the world with that link. And we're happy to share those with you so you have access to all these great tools as well. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns or trying to get a tool that you can't access, or well, how do I use this? I got access, but I don't remember how to use it. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm very happy to help. I see some great questions in the chat, and some of them have been addressed. I appreciate your time and letting me join you today and problem solve together with you. Maybe now the medic team can address some of those questions. The URL in the chat, it is coming.